Our dear Heavenly Father, it's our privilege to be gathered here this morning, and it's our pleasure to have the Lee family with us. Please be with them, have them present a message that we will all be edified by, and lift us closer to thy throne of grace. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Amen. It's all yours.
Well, thank you, Larry. Good morning. Happy Sabbath, everybody. We are so pleased to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to open your church up to us. And more than anything, we want to share with you, if you can see God's work where we are in Guyana, that would be our goal this morning.
As Larry mentioned, we're both from South Africa, and I'll give a little bit of a background, what brought us to Guyana, and then we'll go into our presentation. We got married in 2011, and then as newlyweds, we went to the country of Chad doing mission work. Chad was an extreme place in many ways, extreme poverty, a lot of malaria, the heat there was almost unbearable. We had malaria twice, actually, while we were there, and we left because we wanted to give our livers a break, and because we also had hepatitis, so that was a hard year for us health-wise. But during the time we were back in South Africa, we heard about a school in Michigan, and that is where Darren applied for his aircraft mechanic license, to be able to work on the planes. While in Chad, he felt this is really something he needs to have, that training. Being in the bush, it just makes sense to work on your own plane, to fly it and know everything is running smoothly. And so he applied to the school. He was first told that the school was full, but he reapplied. He was persistent. He got his references to fill out their part. He sent in the application, and finally they told him that there were 30 seats in the class. The class was full, but there were 2 possible dropouts, and he was the second in waiting in that intake for that year. And we were really hoping he would get in, because we didn't want to waste a year before we got where we were going in the next phase of our lives. And miraculously, the Lord opened the doors for Darren to be given the 30th seat in that class. One dropped out, and he was given that spot, the coveted last seat in that class. And so he was able to do his training, his A&P training. And it was there that we met the Nagy family, Lynette and Nick. Sorry, Nagy, is that right? I said right. And it was just an amazing year for us to spend in Michigan at Ionia in the school. SMAT was the name of the school. And before I got there, Nick was a great support to Darren. I took a little while to come because of a wedding in my family, and I was still teaching some music lessons and wrapping up the school year. And because in South Africa, the school year ends in December, not in August, or, yeah. So I was finishing up the school year, and then Nick was such a great support. He had just been through the program. He knew the stresses of the finances to pay for the course. He knew everything, and it was just such a wonderful, Darren, to meet Nick there. And then Nick and Lynette signed up with Adventist World Aviation. And we hesitated. We weren't sure if we would fit into any project with AWA. But when AWA came and interviewed them at the school up north, we went along and we thought, well, we can ask some questions. We can find out what projects they have. And we were not sure that this was for us, but we were praying about it. And when it came to ASI 2 weeks before we left, we were on a student visa. We had to leave at the end of that year when SMAT was finished. And that was just amazing how everything came together for that year. The finances, the exams, everything worked out. And just 2 weeks before we were leaving, we met the previous pilot for the Guyana project in the ASI convention in Grand Rapids. And we had certain things in our minds that were prerequisites for this project we were going to fit into. And when Laura spoke, Laura Labor, she mentioned things, she answered our questions, and in our minds it was just like a mental check. going off at different things. We could have children. The malaria was low. They hadn't had malaria there in 9 years, whereas in Chad, you're just bound to get malaria just being there 1 year because the malaria is so rife. And we didn't feel comfortable taking children into a very high-risk malaria place because we'd seen doctors and nurses lose children up in Chad, their own children. So we didn't feel comfortable not being medical ourselves. And so we signed up with Adventist World Aviation based on that report from Laura, and Judd was also there speaking with us, one of the heads of Adventist World Aviation, and they were still up in Wisconsin then, but they've moved and the base is here now, and that brings us close to this area. And we went to Guyana on our first visit in 2015, and that was our introduction to the village, the jungle, South America, first time there, and we were just happy to find a place that we could fit in and serve in our capacity. Also, Chad was a French-speaking country, so having an English-speaking country was a very big advantage for us because we saw the hurdles of working through an interpreter, we saw the difficulties, and we felt that this was another huge advantage of a place where we could serve. And so that brought us to Guyana, and we went there when Rosanna was 1 year old to make this our permanent home while serving for this 6-year mission project that we were involved in. And so we're going to show you a few slides from there, and we'll show some of the building projects, what's been happening, how Brother Larry came down, and we just pray you'll be blessed as we share.
Okay, here's a quote for you. The Father from his throne beholds those who do these acts of mercy and numbers them with his most precious treasures. And they shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in the day when I make up my jewels. Amen. Okay, Guyana is situated right next to Venezuela, Brazil, and Suriname. And that is where, some people will say, Guyana, is that in Africa? No, that's Ghana in Africa. So we're just clarifying here it's in South America. And
in your mind's eye, picture miles and miles of dense jungle. The place we're going to has no roads to get there. The little village in the northwestern corner of Guyana called Mamarum is our home. Nick has been there, and so has Brother Larry. A network of rivers connects this village to other villages, but most of these places have very little in the way of health care. And there is a boat, though, that travels to the capital city every 2 weeks. If you're willing to undertake the 26-hour journey by boat, most of which is on the open sea. We did that journey once, never again. Tropical weather conditions prevail. There are lots of mosquitoes, lots of humidity throughout the year. It's the wet season and the dry season. That's the seasons we have. This village is our base from which we share the hope that we have in the gospel of Jesus Christ through a tool that meets a huge need in our region: aviation.
okay, when we got to Guyana, this was the plane that was on the project. It's still there. It's a Cessna 182 with a few bells and whistles to make it nice to fly there. I'm not going to go into details because I think Nick might be the only one that understands, but basically it's got a stall kit, short takeoff and landing. It's got on the wings. It's got big tires for the rough runways, and a very important modification that it's got is the back seats fold away. So we can take a patient lying down in there. And then last year, we got another plane. This is also a Cessna 182. very similar to the first one. If you don't see the registration, you might not know the difference, because they got exactly the same paint job. And there you see both of them together right on our runway in Mamarum. As the pilot in the project, I've got a number of responsibilities, but at the moment we only have one pilot. You see in the right-hand seat is Bruce Wilkerson. He's our project manager. And we work very closely with the local government, which makes it nice because we have a good relationship, a good working relationship with them. We will fly the regional chair, the chairman around for meetings, the regional executive officer and his deputy, and basically we're working in Region 1. Now Guyana is divided up into 10 regions, and we're supporting Region 1. And so that's the local government. Mamarum is actually the seat of the local government in Region 1, okay? And we might work, we sometimes fly the engineer to check on his building projects. Maybe they're building a school or a hospital or something like that. And logistics of getting around there are difficult. So making it easier for them to get in and out of the villages is something we do. We also work with the local church when the pastor would like to be transported, because they have big areas. It takes them days to travel between one village and another, and we can do it in minutes. So if we get the opportunity, if the pastor needs to travel, we'll try and do that. Also mission groups that come, we can get them in and out of villages, and that key for them to be able to move around. We also offer a service to the locals when their loved ones are deceased. The boats don't have refrigeration, and so there's no way sometimes of getting that deceased back to them unless they fly, and so we will do that for them. We will pick up a body of their loved one, bring them back to them so that they can have a proper burial and stuff. So in that way, we really show that we care for the people there. Then, let's see, did I cover? Okay, then we also do on call. Oh, Joanne just mentioned the payroll. We will fly that for the local government. They will give us once a month. We fly the strong box, as they call it, and it's full of cash because the villages don't have banks or ATM machines. So basically, the doctors and nurses and teachers have to be paid. So we'll do that for them. We'll fly in the pay, and we'll drop it off at each village. We fly from one airstrip to another, dropping off their pay, and then we'll come back. And they really do appreciate that. So then we've got, I'm actually on call during daylight hours. I can get called anytime for a medical evacuation. And I've got to be like that Minuteman. You know, they'll call, and sometimes it's an emergency. It has to happen now. We just got a few examples here to give you a feel of what it's like. Here's a little baby, probably just a few hours old, and it was struggling to breathe. So I got to fly this little baby to Georgetown. It's on oxygen, which means there's certain times that I can't go up to a good cruising altitude. I've got to stay just above the trees, low level. And this would be the case because their lungs, the baby needs oxygen, so I can't go up high. We'll stay low level and make that flight. Here's a little child also struggling to breathe. Okay? I think pneumonia, this was the case here. And we were able to do that medical evacuation. You see it again, the same child here sitting in the plane. I'm just making sure that everyone's in properly before we can take off. And I remember this case very clearly. Little Katiana, she was about 5 years old, I believe, unconscious with fever, and I flew her and her father into Georgetown to the hospital there. This lady was a real critical case. She was bleeding in her stomach, and they were flushing out her stomach, trying to get the blood out, and they were running out of. I think they had the last bit of blood that they could give her in Mamarum, and they said, "We have no more blood. If she doesn't get to the capital quickly, she's going to die." And so we were able to load her up and fly her in. That was they were just doing a quick flush of her stomach before we took to the air. She's in the plane at this point. I believe this was a snake bite. We've had a number of snake bite victims, and this lady had been bitten on her ankle, her foot there, and we flew her in. This was also a snake bite, so we do that. And pregnancy complications. Here this lady is in labor and starting to have problems. The baby wasn't coming, and so we were able to load her up and fly her quickly in. It takes about an hour and 15 minutes to make the flight from our village into the capital. And then we've got, so sometimes I will fly them from the hospital that's in the village. Sometimes I have to go pick them up at different villages. So we'll fly into the village, pick them up, then take them quickly.
I'm just going to interject. Our previous pilot actually had a baby born in the plane. Thankfully, they send a medical assistant to accompany the patient, but that hasn't happened to us.
Okay, here's another one. A young boy. He had an accident. It was a boating accident. Two boats collided, and he had a very bad head injury. At this point, he could not. He was in and out of consciousness, but he could not talk. He couldn't speak. But we loaded him up here in the plane, and he recovered just fine. We heard more about him later. This man, I'm just running through them quickly just to give you the feel, but this man had I think he was drunk at the time, and he fell on the flywheel of a boat engine while it was running, and he lacerated his shoulder, the back, and he lost a lot of blood. And so we had to act quickly and get him in to town. This man with a head injury and obstructed bowel, this one. Okay, so that gives you an idea. Tuberculosis is something that I've flown tuberculosis cases. None of the air carriers will do it. You can imagine we have to fly with masks, but we do it. We do it for them. We'll fly them in while the others will reject a flight like this. Okay, then we got maintenance. And Joanne told you how I was able to get the training done up in Michigan to be an aircraft mechanic, and that training has been such a blessing because I am the mechanic on the project. So anyone who knows a bit about aviation knows that maintenance is a very, very important part. Without this, we can't fly. So during the year, I do the maintenance on the plane, and this is traditionally how we've done it. There we're doing a compression check. Rebecca Cruttenden is helping here. I'm holding the propeller, and you can imagine with a high rainfall, tropical rainfall, during rainy season, it can rain, it can downpour 5 times in a day, no problem. So it's very hard when you're working outside. We've had that maintenance trailer that we pull up next to the plane and then pull a tarp over. And I remember clearly once my oil pan underneath actually started floating away. The rain was coming down so hard, this oil pan was just was on the go. But there you see Nick has once a year we have to have an annual inspection. So someone with a bit more experience and higher qualifications has to do the annual inspection. And Nick has been doing that for us. Every year he's come down to do that to keep our planes flying. Construction. This is something you may not have realized. I'm sure you've got some idea, but Little Creek has already done a lot for us in Guyana. And you'll see some of the pictures here. Brother Larry came down. There's a picture of him. And we had a prefab hangar that was sent down in a shipping container. And Larry was the brains behind putting it up.
And muscle.
Yes. So
And lots of muscle.
there were Thomas Magan. He came down as well with Larry, and they together were such a blessing for us because it changed our lives having this hangar. And there you see it starting to go up.
That picture was taken at the very early hours of morning, before the sun got up so that they wouldn't get too sunburnt, I believe.
Yes.
Larry was up, crack of dawn.
The work that you can do before it gets hot can save you during the hot times. So, and here we are bolting the roof trusses together. These had to be bolted together, 3 of them in a line before they could be lifted up. Some of the challenges of working in a village setting are that we don't have this. Sometimes we have to figure out ways of doing things. We don't have the equipment that you would have here. So this was a truck that the generator house for the village operate, and they had this boom, and they said, we'll lend it to you. And we were so happy because we had no way of getting these trusses up there. And the Lord provided with this truck, and we were able to put these trusses up on the frame. And here you see the roof is starting to go on. We are very excited at this point. You really can. And there's a picture from underneath. This picture actually was moments before we had a little bit of a disaster, because right at that point, I'm just going to go back there, right on the roof there, it was about 15 feet up, where this young man here, Jerry, he lost his balance and he fell off the roof, and he landed on his hip and his arm and his head. And anyone who knows, 15 feet, but he landed on concrete. And we were very concerned because this could have been exceptionally bad. We called the ambulance. The ambulance picked him up and took him to the hospital. And we gathered around him. We prayed for him. And they took him for x-rays. And everyone was surprised he didn't have a broken bone. He was still struggling, though, because his eyesight was blurred. He had hit his head very hard on the concrete, and he couldn't see well. And so the doctors were very concerned. Now, they couldn't do a scan in the village, so they took him to the capital. This was just before he flew out. He had a smile on his face still, and he could walk. This was a few days after the accident, but he had to go into the capital to get a scan, because we thought that he could still have some serious damage on his eye, his head. And it turned out that after the scan, they said he was fine. And we were just praising the Lord because we felt that was a miracle. And there you can see that our maintenance, as picture here, has completely changed. We now have 2 planes sitting in a hangar, and we can work on them without the baking sun and the rain falling on us.
Amen.
We had the shipping container that it came in was a 20-foot container, and we've stuck that back here in the corner. And we've got a workbench in there now and some shelves, and we can lock all our tools inside there, and it just makes the whole operation much easier. And here is a mechanic in the training. Enjoying the roof over our heads, and Nick got to enjoy this hangar now because he's just recently got back from the annual inspection. Bruce is on the right. You can on the picture there. He's the maintenance, project manager, and Thomas Magan also went down to help for the annual inspections on the plane. And here they are at work, enjoying the benefit of the hangar.
There's been also another construction project. The previous year, this was the house/learning center constructed mostly under the project manager's supervision. And we're just so pleased that this building operation is now complete. It's a beautiful center. Downstairs, they're holding tutoring programs, they're holding Bible studies, weekly church meetings, Wednesday night prayer meeting. It opens our project possibilities up, expands us in a very meaningful way, and you can see worship being done in a little while. Actually, our previous substitute pilot came down, and his wife was autistic, and she did this mural for the children's corner, and we just love the artwork she did there. Let the little children come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of God. The parrots and the toucans are very common sights in Guyana. The bird life is amazing there. So there you see the children on one side, and then the adults worship on the other side. They've recently done the flooring, and it's looking very nice, that center, and the project manager lives upstairs. So for our house, we rent still. We'd still like to build, but this is what we have now. And now the last phase of our presentation is just the outreach that we do. And if you do have questions later, we'd be happy to answer them if there's anything we haven't covered. But a huge area in the village is the children. The children are oh so needy. If you can get them when they're young, you can change a generation and the way they think, because there's a very strong law of the jungle there, and do it the way your father did it, and this is my lot in life, and it's just a very strong family heritage. If you haven't read, if my parents don't read, why should I learn to read? Kids drop out of school. So we try to encourage them to go to school. We give out backpacks and school supplies. These are all donated. They're handed out to the children, pencils, little scissors and rulers and things like that. And the kids love to receive these. It gives them a wonderful incentive to use them in school learning and not to drop out. That is another little group that receive backpacks. And we like to see those bright backpacks going down the road on the way to kids' classes. This is our Sabbath school class that we do from week to week in the little Thomas Hill church where we worship. There's another church program going at the center where the project manager runs that with their group. The lighting isn't very good, but this is where we worship. It's actually an outreach, this group. The parents don't attend church, but the children come for the class, and we learn songs together, we do crafts, we do Bible stories and pray, and it's just a wonderful outreach. We also do VBS programs annually, and I must say the Lord has provided an amazing team that I can work with. Having little kids of my own, you have to work with the locals to make things happen. And I've got an amazing group of ladies at our little church that have been such a strong support. Our main helper is not Adventist, but she's deciding. She's so involved. When we're away, she runs with the children's program. Her own nieces attend, and she's very motivated, and she's actually the chairman's secretary, so she's got a good position in the local government. But she's deciding to attend our church. She's faithful in attending, and I pray. She actually did indicate that she would be baptized. She was very hesitant at the recent campaign, but we believe that her heart is in God's work, in the Word of God, and she's such an asset right there. And so our VBS program, that is actually her, Lynn. Speaking of her, she's on the right, and we had a little recorder group through the duration of the VBS week, and the older students learned those recorders, and we played it for church. They did their first item that first Sabbath after VBS. We had a lot of fun with that. And we had a dental outreach team come. This was a river outreach project. Hundreds of people were seen on the river in the communities. We went out by boat, and this was a huge blessing. A dentist from Canada and another dentist from the US, I think it was Idaho. He came out along with some assistants, and they saw patients just sitting on benches and not having the right dental chairs. They just went ahead. They brought their material with them, and they were able to see a lot of people and help those in need of dental work. We, on a small scale, have been involved in hydrotherapy. I didn't mention that my husband and I spent some time at Wildwood in the US before. 6 years, Darren and I was there about 5.5 years. That was before we got married, but we learned simple remedies there, and so we help in the village where we can. This lady had been to the hospital, and she had an abscess at the back here, so we applied heat there, and it helped that abscess to drain. She was very thankful to be relieved of her pain. The second day we did this, it was drained, so she was so thankful. And that's how you build friendships in the community. The hospital had refused to drain it. They had refused to lance it surgically, so that's how we stepped in. But we do it where we can and where there's a need. This man had a big coconut fall on his foot. A huge water coconut, the wet ones, the real heavy ones with lots of liquid in them. He was picking them, it fell on his foot. He had months and months of swelling and pain, couldn't walk, and we showed him hydrotherapy. We did it. He was so thankful. His wife was away visiting her relatives in Venezuela for some months, so she was away, and we did this, and he was so happy with the results. He could walk better. He was sleeping at night again, and gradually that foot healed, and today he's able to get around fine. It's completely healed. So that's Brother George. So we were just thankful for hydrotherapy, simple things that you can do out there. We were able to get ice. You purchase ice. We didn't have a freezer at that point, but we do have the ability to make ice now. And then recently, in the past year, just after Brother Larry left with the hangar construction, we started sewing classes. And we've been taking machines down slowly as we send barrels down. And we're able to leave this at our church, the little Thomas Hill Church. It's got nice desks. It's a one-room church, but it's got desks and benches that they work at. And when the power comes on from the village generator at about 5 p.m., 2 days a week, we meet there, we sew together, and they do sewing for the children. It's like an outreach and a lovely time for the ladies together. We've had non-Adventists attend. It's been just a lovely group, and we want to expand this and reach out to other communities that don't have access to machines, because they have time on their hands, but they don't necessarily know what to do with it. And for young ladies, this is great. We leave the machines there, and they can come anytime the power's on and sew if they want to. We provide cloth. If anyone wants to get involved with this, please contact us. We take donated cloth, we just put it into barrels, and we send it down there. Machines that don't have to be brand new, but as long as they're working and strong, we'll take them down. Some pictures of the sewing going on there. And that's been a great project. And also, another way that we can encourage locals to get involved in industry is making soap. There's so much coconut in the village. You'll see all the coconut palms, and this is a resource that they can have access to. You can get the coconuts very cheaply if you don't have them growing on your own property, but the locals know how to make the coconut oil. And it is a bit of work, grating those coconuts down, but once they make the oil, we provide the active ingredient, which is caustic soda, or lye, as they call it, and then we show the recipe, and they can make a little industry out of it. They can or use it at home. Some are selling the soap. The previous missionaries actually started this, and we're continuing it. So we showed this family how to make the soap, and they're very excited to use it. It cures for about a month, and then they can sell it or use it on their own. And then this is one more little avenue recently that has become a need. People coming across from Venezuela, people coming with very little in the way of houses. They make a shelter. It's very temporary, but this is how they're living. They're coming across. There are about 1,500 people coming across who have come across, and they don't have a lot in the way of money, hardly any food. When we went there, they hadn't eaten in 3 days. This is a very serious need. Our headquarters has reached out to ADRA Canada to help with this project. The Waro people, they speak Waro, not English, and so we're targeting special needs of this group. Our project team down there is trying to teach English and hold branch Sabbath schools to reach the Waro people, and they're living right there. It's like Venezuela has come to us with the problems that they have. And so this is our challenge lately, to meet the needs of the Waro people. This is a lady just doing her washing out on the lawn, on the grass outside, and a Waro gentleman. They're mostly fishermen, and they have their dugout canoes, and life is simple out in the village. Very simple. Darren also has been conducting weekly Bible studies. I'm just going to go quickly through this. And he started with the sanctuary and the Old Testament lessons we can learn from the sanctuary, because these people have been asking, tell us what it means to be an Adventist. Tell us what those distinctive teachings are, so we know why we exist. And the people who have been attending have been very excited to learn about what the old sanctuary services meant and how we can apply that today to our lives. They hadn't heard of the Great Disappointment, concepts that we hear a lot in our circles, in our Bible studies, but we've been able to go deeper. And this gentleman working with Darren there, he helped a little bit with the hangar construction. He was very excited to attend that Bible study, and he has since decided to commit his life to the Lord. He comes from a Catholic background. He and his family have been reading The Great Controversy. They've been excited at what they were learning from the Bible studies, just calling us every week, I want to go with you, make sure you come and pick me up, I want to attend that Bible study. We're not necessarily people who have done in-depth, Bible. We haven't done, a degree in theology or anything, but the Lord has given us tools to work with, and it's to reach simple people. So you don't necessarily need a degree in theology to reach simple village people, and the Lord gives you wisdom how to tell them the gospel in a simple way. And we have had pastors come in and do evangelistic series. We have worked with the conference. We have a local pastor, but his region is just so vast, he can't cover as many churches as he'd like to. So we support all that he does. And this is a visiting pastor and one of our newest members in our little congregation. It's actually not a church yet, it's a little company, right? Our little Thomas Hill. But this lady decided to give her heart to the Lord, and I believe that our friend Lloyd from the previous picture will be soon to go into those waters of baptism. And so we're just thrilled at how, it doesn't necessarily have to be numbers, but thrilled at how the Lord is making a difference in these corners of the world, the remote places. The Holy Spirit is there, although you might think some days it's been withdrawn. The amount of spiritualism, the amount of superstition, the amount of addiction, the amount of alcoholism that you see around you, but the Lord is still working on hearts and touching people. Amen. He is alive still and working. And then this is just a recent story from South Africa where we've just been. We'd been home for about just over a week. Our family lives in a high fire risk area, and things were overgrown before when we got there. Things were overgrown. The fire breaks were not in place. It was just a risky situation all round. So we saw this fire on the hill, and we started praying. We had actually had a terrible drought, and we ran out of water. So there wasn't a lot of water to even think of putting out fires, and that terrain up there on the mountain, we cannot get to it. It's so thick, the brush, and the roads are not to get that high. So we saw this fire, and rain did come and put out the fire. And we were thankful because we were just starting to pack our bags and get them in the vehicle, and the rain put out the fire. But a few days later, the fire flared up again. We thought it was out, but it flared up again. And we watched it this time. We didn't pack our bags right away. We were watching it. A helicopter was working, and we thought, okay, maybe he'll put it out. And that was Friday when the helicopter worked, and the wind was in his favor, but he didn't get it out. And we went Friday night, the fire was still burning, and the wind was due to change direction towards us. And Saturday morning, he couldn't get near the fire because of the winds. And we were told to evacuate, get out. And we just were caught suddenly by surprise. Yes, we'd seen the fire there, we'd seen it, but suddenly we had no more time. And they said on their way out, the firefighters said, 10 minutes, get out. And we just had one pickup load. We'd put it all in the vehicle and we got out. There was no time to panic, no time to pack anything big. We got off the property and we thought that was it. We would lose everything. Thankfully, the Lord spared our dwellings. It burnt right around 360, and it was swept through the valley. His parents' place was spared. 2 wooden structures in the midst of the blaze, the path of the blaze. And this, even the firefighters use as a testimony that God is real. But the lesson that we draw out of this is that we thought we had time. We thought we had more time. We packed our bags the first time and we waited, but it came so fast. There's a spiritual lesson in this, and I'll come back to it in a moment. There's the other picture. Just 360 around us was completely black. It burned. And then another recent event, 3 weeks later.
Yes, we got the lesson twice. But 3 weeks later, Joanne went into labor with our beloved Christy coming, and we went into the hospital, and we knew that the time was short. Our baby was coming, but we didn't know exactly when. And the day went by. We went there in the morning, and the day dragged on. And by about 5 o'clock, some of our family, we felt they should go home because, to take the little ones back. They had been supportive all day long, and it was time that they could, go home and get something to eat and get, And so about 5 o'clock, I went to the nurses and I said, "Nurse, tell me, when do you think the baby will be born?" And the nurse said, "No, the baby's still going to be a long time. It's going to be like 8, 9 o'clock tonight before the baby's born." So I went to Joanne and I said to her, fortunately her mother was still there. I had come and she was with Joanna, and I said to her, "Let me take the rest of the family back home. At least they can have something to eat and rest. And I'll be back soon. They say the baby's not going to come right now." And she said, "Okay." So her mom stayed with her, and I jumped into the vehicle. I drove the rest back to the farm. Now there's no signal out on the farm where we are. And as we got there, a tree had fallen down over the road. And so we had to I had to get out and move branches and lift, and we have to lift it out the way, and the vehicle we drove underneath. Now I dropped everyone off, and I took a saw with me. I said, on the way out, I'm going to have to saw it so that I could move through. So I took the saw, cut it, and then headed to town. And as I got to the hospital, suddenly I got all these messages on my phone, come quickly, the baby's coming. And I was at the door of the hospital, and I was like, I'm here. And I knocked, they let me in, and they said, the baby's born 15 minutes ago. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, at the time that you think that.
Well, there's spiritual lessons to be learned from these events in our lives, and we can look for those and learn lessons. But the Lord's coming is soon. Amen. We don't know how much time we have. We can see the signs. We can see it's getting close. We can see the natural disasters. We can see the turmoil in countries. We know it's coming. Let's not think we have more time than we do. We don't know the hour. We know that the last events are going to be rapid ones. And so this message is to us as believers, not to those who think, oh, Christ is never going to come. We know he's coming. Amen. But let's not think we have more time than we do. Let's be faithful every moment of the day so that we will be ready. Let's be watching and ready, as the chapter says in Matthew. And in closing, I'm going to have a song. It's called I Will Go. And the message is, will you go when God asks you to go? Knowing that we only have a short time, will you go?